Hello, good morning. I'm Matt Addison. David Lynch is with me as ever to look at the latest Liverpool news. And there's only one topic that we can be talking about this morning, the news that FSG have put Liverpool up for sale and what that means. As ever, do get your comments and your questions into the chat. We'll get to some of those as we go along. But I suppose the first thing we'll start with, David, we talked a lot around this on the podcast yesterday, but there was a story in the Financial Times last night that suggested one bidder had already come to the table. That was one of the things that I asked you on the podcast yesterday, really, was, well, who could it be? How attractive might it be? It didn't take long for one person or one group to come to the table. I suppose that's what we shouldn't forget, really. As much as Liverpool, you're not going to make as much of a profit necessarily as what FSG might if they sell. It is still going to be a very appealing asset to go for.
Yeah, and I think the interest's only going to grow. I think this idea of not shooting down the idea of selling the club, the whole basis of that, I suppose, is to drum up further interest and to try and push the price up as high as possible and see who's out there. And I think, I mean, it seems crazy, doesn't it? Because as you say, I think it's going to be so much more difficult to make a profit, particularly in the next couple of years or so. You expect to be more and more difficult for the asset to increase in value. It's still crazy that people are interested in that sort of money, but they definitely are. And to have one buyer or potential buyer to have expressed interest already, it just shows that these assets that they are it's rare that they come on the market, and I suppose that's part of the reason why people still think they can eke some value out of it. It's because it doesn't come around very often that a club of Liverpool's size or a sporting institution of that size comes on the market. So it's interesting to read that story that there's already been someone expressing interest in potentially buying the club, and I think there'll be many more before a sale goes through. I think FSG would like there to be a sort of a little bit of a bidding war comes together before they make any decisions about selling, because I think that's only another element that will push the price up and therefore increase their profit on the 300 million was it that he paid 12 years ago.
Yeah, the suggestion seems to be from a couple of different people that it would be sort of 4 billion plus that Liverpool would be worth now, which, as you say, is a massive increase. I mean, there's not that many people out there, as we spoke about yesterday. There's not too many people who've got a spare 4 billion to be throwing at a football club. There's not loads and loads of options, but there will be sort of enough options for them to assess. And I think that's right, isn't it, what you say there? I mean, they're going to want as many people to come to the table as possible. They're going to want to drive up a bit of a bidding war. It kind of strikes me that either they've got someone lined up already and it's just going to happen, or it's going to take a good few months. I don't really see it being in between. It's kind of a long process, or it's kind of already done, and there's not much in between.
Yeah, I don't get the impression that there's someone just lined up and this is basically, this information has come out just on the basis that, it's about to happen imminently, because, I think, some of the way this news is received is almost like, oh, well, FSG usually when there's a transfer about to happen, will leak the information quite close to. I mean, that's not how journalism works, for starter. I think it's worth us sort of explaining that to people, that for starters, they don't tend to leak transfer information anymore. That's very difficult to get hold of, actually, and particularly the story like this. All that's happened really is that David Ornstein has received that information through a source and gone to check it, and FSG haven't knocked it down. So, okay, they've almost admitted it in a way, but it's not been a sort of calculated leak by any means. I don't think it's that, okay, this sale process is so far along that we can let people know about it. This is very much, I think, early days, and I think also they've wanted to use it as a tool to drum up further interest, definitely. So I don't think it's going to be imminent. I think there is a long way to possibly run with this one. Maybe it could move sort of slightly quicker than we expect, in terms of, because everyone knows now that Liverpool is on the market, then you're going to get a lot of interest very suddenly, and people are going to want to move quickly because they know, for example, that they missed out on Chelsea quite recently. This process won't be as quick as that, but we'll be even more keen to get over the line in this one because they missed out on Chelsea. So, that could push things along a little bit, but I do think we're at the early stages of the process, because I think it's the timing of that admission almost that Liverpool are up for sale is an interesting one. It just suggests to me that FSG would like a little bit more interest and to create that bidding war that we spoke about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's going to be a bit of a queue of people interested. And it's interesting, isn't it, in terms of the landscape? I think that the statement from them referenced this yesterday, and that there's been a couple of teams that have changed hands. There's been a couple of bits of speculation around, say, Manchester United, Arsenal. There were protests there, and there was certain people who came forward and suggested that they might be interested. I suppose that's something that Liverpool are going to have to get used to over the next few weeks. There's going to be a number of people who come out and almost try and sell themselves. I can't remember some of the names that were interested in Arsenal. Was it the owner of Spotify or something like that came in and sort of tried to make a big pitch of what he was going to do and all of that sort of stuff. I mean, we've kind of got that to look forward to if that's the right way of putting it over the next few weeks, because it is probably going to be quite public in some ways.
Yeah, 100%. You'll get that. People selling themselves to fans and making huge promises about what they'll do around transfers, and then not really giving you any background on any other detail that actually matters. We'll get a lot of that, and a lot of people will put the name in the hat who don't really have the funds to complete a deal of this size. That's something that happens a lot. You see that when, for example, Championship clubs go up for sale quite frequently. And you see people involved want to get their name involved in that process and say that they can save the club if they'll do this and that. And in the end, it turns out to be a lot of hot air because people just want to attach their name to that sale process or that club. So I expect a little bit of that even at this scale. I think Liverpool's a huge brand and people will want to be associated with that, even people who don't have the means to buy the club. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of nonsense put out there in this process, no doubt about it, especially now that it's public. It's all about sort of, for fans not getting too carried away with what's being promised on the surface. And you think, FSG, a sensible businessman, I do think that this process is going to be hopefully run in a sensible way, and that there will be some consideration towards Liverpool's future. And they do see themselves as custodians, and that it's not just a case of making the biggest profit possible, but ensuring that there's, sort of the long-term health of the club is preserved, as well as making a huge profit. Let's not lie about that. But, if those two considerations can come together, that will be a good thing. And you hope that will be the case, and that, some of the nonsense that gets spoke around it is discarded, and that the best possible future owners of Liverpool are found.
Yeah, you'd like to think that they'd want that as well, wouldn't you? I mean, in terms of the last few years, what Liverpool have won, the position that Liverpool find themselves in, it wouldn't really make sense to tarnish that by selling it to the wrong person. It does kind of make a little bit of sense. Let's go to a couple of comments that we've got. I mean, lots of questions at this stage that we have to be honest, we don't know the answers to. I mean, what does it mean for the playing squad and the coaching staff? Will transfer business be affected? I mean, at this point, it's, we have to be honest, we don't know exactly the timescales on these sorts of things, but these are the questions that Liverpool fans are going to be asking over the next few weeks. I suppose the only thing we can say to that is, well, FSG are still committed to Liverpool. They're not sort of out the door and gone. They're very much still here. They may not sell. There is still probably more questions than answers at this point.
Yeah, to be honest, though, I think the answer there is that it will just be business as usual. FSG aren't in the position of desperately needing to sell. Okay, they think that this might be the right time, and they want to generate that interest and see what's out there in terms of offers. But very much up until that point of the sale goes through, it'll be business as usual. I don't think it'll have a huge effect on the squad and the coaching staff. They just get on with the jobs as usual. The same for the people who work in Chapel Street around digital media or finance or all the other elements of the club. Will just be business as usual. There's no real change until something actually happens in terms of a switch of ownership. And I think that the same will go for the recruitment staff, really, in terms of the transfer business. I think the money's there that was always there, or the money's not there that was never there, or it's exactly as it is or as it was in terms of how they approach transfers. I think that could be a possibility. That there's money in January to spend. I think there's a possibility for some movement there, particularly if they decide that they actually want to solve this midfield problem. But I don't think it's anything different to how it was before. I think FSG will just want to run the club as they have always done up until the point at which it changes hands. And I think that I suppose that creates some sort of continuity for everyone who's working at the club. They don't want that uncertainty around anything, and it can be a really uncertain time when you've got something like this going on. But I think FSG will just want to run it as business as usual, and that lets everyone know what the job is, and it's just to carry on doing what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And getting into the top four in the Premier League, I mean, even that sort of thing will play into the value and the sort of asset as well. Let's just go to another question as well. I mentioned this one yesterday. The RedBird element of this is really interesting. I'm going to be speaking to our Business of Football writer, Dave Powell, in an hour or two to get the latest from him and his sort of perspective on it for a podcast. So do check that out when that comes out. But this is an interesting element to me. I think he's spoken in the past about potentially, that could become something more significant if the opportunity came up. I mean, we don't know. Again, we're speculating, but it does seem to make a little bit of sense to me.
Yeah, in terms of the possibility that expanding their the stake in the club, possibly, yeah. In terms of, if that were to happen, would that be enough to say FSG and say that, okay, we don't want to cash out at this point. We've got this investment coming from this element, but I do think that the profit that they stand to make with a full sale is so huge. And the ability to sort of cash out and say, okay, we've done that job. We no longer have to sort of run this and maybe go and reinvest that money in an NFL team or NBA or whatever other sort of vehicles that they're eyeing up as a potential investment vehicle for the future. I think it's just too tempting at the moment to maybe cash out fully. And if the offers are there, the realistic offers that are good and baking that huge profit for them, then I think they would prefer to go down that route at the moment. If that wasn't the case, I just don't think they would have publicly admitted that this is a possibility at the moment. So I just think if the interest is good enough and big enough and the price is right, then Liverpool will move on, and the RedBird possibility of expanding their stake, I think, would come as second best in terms of where they rank those two things at the moment.
Yeah, certainly lots of interesting elements to this. We'll have all of the latest, of course, across the Echo and Liverpool.com. Lots more reaction and analysis to come. As I mentioned before, I'm going to be speaking to Dave Powell for a podcast shortly. Do check that out later on when that comes out. But I think we'll leave it there for now. Thank you to David for joining me. We'll catch you all later.